Okay. Spinning bar again. Okay, that looks better. We just get a confirmation that's working and the sound's coming through okay for everybody, inshallah. Okay, Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala amma ba'd. So this is inshallah something that the Masjid Tawheed Newcastle Central Mosque, they asked me to do for them every Sunday at 7 p.m. And the idea is to gather together all of the questions that people have asked during the week. And the reason that I asked for people to put their questions together during the week via a link that was posted on the Masjid Facebook is just to give me time to look over them, to make sure that I had time to research anything that I wasn't sure of and ask any in case there were things that I wasn't sure of. And I think that inshallah ta'ala would produce a better quality of answer, inshallah. So let me just let the masjid know that it's working. Let's get the masjid to confirm that we're good to start. Okay, so they're telling me it's working and we are good to start, inshallah ta'ala. So the very first question that we had is, what exactly is the maqam of Ibrahim? Are the footsteps inside really Ibrahim's footprints? And how was that exact location known from thousands of years ago? So first of all, the maqam of Ibrahim is something mentioned in the Quran, and it's mentioned in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As for the Quran, the statement of Allah Azza wa Jalla, وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى, take from the place of Ibrahim, or from the maqam of Ibrahim, a place of prayer. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded us to pray behind the maqam of Ibrahim. So the maqam of Ibrahim is something that was well known and is still well known today. However, the footprints or the marks that are within the stone, because the maqam Ibrahim, as Sheikh bin Baz rahimahullah ta'ala, he said حجر كان يقوم عليه يبني. It was a stone that Ibrahim stood on to build the Kaaba. فلما فرغ جعله تحت جدار الكعبة. That when he finished from it, he put that maqam, he put that stone, he put it underneath the wall or next to the wall of the Kaaba. And then the Prophet ﷺ commanded us to pray behind it, and Allah said, وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى, take the maqam of Ibrahim as a place of prayer. And Umar, he moved it away from the walls of the Kaaba to stop crowding, and he moved it backwards a little bit to the place where it is now. So the stone is something well known. However, the footprints on the stone, which are the markings that are on the stone today, what it appears is that they are not the markings that were made by Ibrahim. And the reason for that is, even though Anas radiallahu anhu reports that he saw the markings of the footstep of Ibrahim inside of the maqam, since then there are scholars from the scholars of history and hadith who commented that the marks were not visible in their time. And that was a long, long time before the time that we're in now. So what it appears is that the markings in the stone were made after that, and they are not the markings that were made by Ibrahim alayhi salam, but the stone itself is the maqam Ibrahim, the place where Ibrahim, he stood upon alayhi salatu wassalam. So hopefully that answered the question. The stone itself is well known. The fact that it was moved by Umar is well known, but the actual markings are unlikely to be the markings that were left by Ibrahim alayhi salam, and are more likely to be probably that when the markings faded, that probably people or someone took it upon themselves to kind of show where they were and mark where they were, and so these markings came. But it is unlikely that those markings are the markings that were left by Ibrahim alayhi salam, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. The next question: what is the ruling of buying gold via the internet, in which they purchase the item and ship it to you, or they hold it in a vault for you? So the purchase of gold is something which is heavily regulated in Islam, and it's something in which you can have riba and nasi'a. You can have a kind of riba, a kind of interest in it, which is not the kind of interest that we are most familiar with. The kind of interest we're most familiar with is the interest you get from the bank, right? Or you get in a loan or a mortgage. But this interest is a different kind of interest, and it's an interest that is indicated in a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For example, in the hadith of Ubadah ibn al-Samit radiyallahu anhu, قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: الذهب بالذهب والفضة بالفضة والبر بالبر والشعير بالشعير والتمر بالتمر والملح بالملح مثلا بمثل سواء بسواء يدا بيد فإن اختلفت هذه الأصناف فبيعوا كيف شئتم إذا كان يدا بيد. والحديث رواه الإمام Muslim. Ubadah ibn Samit, he narrated the Messenger of Allah said, gold for gold and silver for silver, and bur for bur, and sha'ir for sha'ir, that is like wheat, and barley for barley and wheat for wheat, and dates for dates and salt for salt, the same amount for the same amount, equal for equal, hand to hand. And if these types differ, then sell them however you wish, as long as it is hand to hand. And the hadith is narrated by Al-Imam Muslim. And in a narration, وَلَا بَأْسَ بِبَيْعِ الذَّهَبِ بِالْفِضَّةِ, there is no harm for you to sell gold for silver, and for as long as it is, again, yadan biyad. وَأَمَّا النَّسِيئَ فَلَا. And as for there to be an increase in the same type, then this is something which is not allowed. So the concern here, which is mentioned in the question, is the issue of the gold not being gold for gold, because the question here is not gold for gold. I'm buying gold on the internet. So buying gold on the internet, we have فَإِنِ اخْتَلَفُ الْأَصْنَافِ, if these types differ from each other, فَإِنِ اخْتَلَفَتْ هَذِهِ الْأَصْنَافِ فَبِيعُوا كَيْفَ شِئْتُمْ, sell however you want, إِذَا كَانَ يَدًا بِيَدٍ, as long as it is hand to hand. So here the issue is not them being from the same type, because we're not doing gold for gold, we're doing gold for money. So the asnaf, the types, are mukhtalifa, they're different. So there is no harm in that to start with. The problem is hand to hand. And when you're on the internet, it's not possible to do hand to hand. Now, it is possible to have a wakil purchase gold on your behalf, where you give somebody money and you say to them, purchase gold on my behalf. But the problem here is that even for the wakil, it has to be hand to hand. So the person who is entrusted to buy that gold on your behalf, they take it into their possession hand to hand, and then they give it to you. The problem we have with the internet is none of these conditions appear to be possible to meet. There are some people who have tried to get around that by saying that we will give you a vault that belongs only to you, and we will put the gold in the vault that belongs only to you. Again, these things at the moment, while we can't get a specific answer on specific products, it doesn't seem to me, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best, that it is possible to do that in an easy way, or to do that in a way that it is Islamically compatible. Maybe the only way you could say is it would need some kind of specialized service or specialized courier service where they would actually purchase the gold first, and then you would purchase the gold from them upon delivery. But that's not what happens. Generally, even if you send a courier, you paid for the gold already, and the courier is just collecting the gold that you've already paid for, and that isn't hand to hand in the same sitting. So there would have to be some sort of service that would be offered whereby you give your money to a trusted person. That person goes to the physical location of the gold, brings the gold into their custody, and that isn't what happens with a typical courier service, and it isn't what happens, to the best of my knowledge, with these products that they're offering where they ship it to you. So there is still, it's difficult to imagine how that would work. Again, I'm giving generic answers really more than a specific particular product or something like that. We'd have to look if someone has found a way to make that work on a particular website with a particular Islamic service. But at the moment, from what I can see, buying gold on the internet is problematic because of the condition, yeden, biyed, hand to hand. And that's the best that I can answer that question based on what research I have done. And I had a look through the fatwa of the ulama, I had some websites, some things, to try to find anyone who made an exception and said, yeah, you can do it like this. But I still couldn't find. I found when people were asked, their answer was, it's not possible, because of this condition not being possible. And even they used to phone some of the mashayikh, Sheikh ibn Uthaymeen, Sheikh ibn Baz, rahimahumullah ta'ala, and ask them about buying on the phone. Say, like, if I buy on the phone, then I go to the shop and I do hand. And the sheikh, he said, you can buy on the phone in the sense you ask the price and you agree that he's going to put it aside for you, but the transaction has to take place when you visit him in person, hand to hand. So, like I said, I can envisage a way it could potentially be possible with a specialized sort of trusted kind of service whereby the courier takes it but doesn't take any money from it until you buy it from the courier hand to hand. Like, the courier comes to your door and you take the gold from them and give the money to them, and the courier's already bought it from the original gold merchant. That could potentially work, but we don't know anybody who's doing something like that. As for the vaults, then I couldn't find anything specific about that. I found some questions in which the mashayikh didn't really, they said it wasn't allowed, they didn't go too much details on it, but I couldn't find anything on that. If there are some conditions whereby the vault could be considered you taking it into your property, like, in most of the time, it's not real, in the sense that it's not really a vault that belongs to you. In reality, it's just like imaginary. It's not, you're really not taking it into your possession. You're not moving it anywhere. It's not being transported anywhere. And it's not something that you have unique access to or control over. It's just a word, like, it's in my vault, but it doesn't really have any reality to it. So that's about all that I can answer on that question, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. As a recent revert to Islam, I'm unsure where I can spend my zakah. How would you suggest that I do this, and what can I do with the interest money I receive from my bank? Jazakallah khairan wa iyyakum. So first of all, with regard to zakah is very heavily regulated in Islam, and we're doing Kitab al-Zakah right now. I hope you guys who are still attending the lessons in the masjid, they're happening via my YouTube channel, obviously from home because of the COVID-19 restrictions. So you go to youtube.com/Muhammad Tim, and they happen. The zakah lessons are on a Tuesday at 7 p.m. and the tafsir on a Friday at 7 p.m. UK time. Allah Azza wa Jalla said in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَفِي الرِّقَابِ وَالْغَارِمِينَ وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ فَرِيضَةً مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ Hakim. In Surah At-Tawbah, ayah number 60, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He told us that zakah is for specific groups of people. And how that zakah is distributed is very important. So what I would suggest is for a new Muslim that instead of you worrying too much about that yourself, that you look for a trusted organization to distribute the zakah for you. And me personally, I'm pretty strict on how the zakah is distributed. I'm not in favor of broadening the zakah to include all kinds of nice projects that we love and we have a lot of respect for, but they're not zakah projects. So I'm very much that zakah, it should be very strictly limited to the people that are specifically mentioned in the Quran. And in most of the time, that is al-fuqara wal-masakin. Most of the time in our day and age and in our time is for the fuqara and the masakin. There are others mentioned in the ayah. That is the poor and the destitute. And I think the easiest thing is to find a reliable charity. I have some suggestions for you. If you go to muhammadtim.com/charity, that's muhammadtim.com/charity. I have a list of charities, no particular order, that I've worked with in the past, that I work with now. And some of them take zakah. Not all of them take zakah, but some of them do take zakah, alhamdulillah. And they are very careful to distribute it properly according to the conditions of the zakah. And not like where we see these days a lot of people expanding upon the possible uses of zakah to include a lot of things that really don't really come under the ayah, at least not zahiran, not obviously. It's not clear that they come within the ayah of what it's allowed to use the zakah for. So I have a recommendation list of charities that I've worked with. It's not exclusive. They're not the only charities that are possible for you to give your zakah to. Just some personal recommendations from my side of people that I've worked with or people that I've come into contact with who do, as far as I can see, have done a very good job as it relates to distributing sadaqat, the charity, and the zakah, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. With regard to interest, the first thing that you need to do is you need to try your very best to get away from a bank that is paying you interest. Or if you can't get out of the bank that's paying you interest, at least get an account that isn't paying you interest. So alhamdulillah, there is a wide range of bank accounts available. There's a lot of banks in the UK, and plenty of those banks and accounts are not giving out interest. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that they're Islamically valid, because there are lots of things to consider. Definitely an Islamic bank would be better than a non-Islamic bank, and definitely a non-Islamic bank that agrees to use your money in an Islamic way in terms of their investments and so on, like a Sharia account, is better than a non-Sharia account. But a minimum standard would be an account that doesn't give out interest. And there's so many of those available. I don't think it's really necessary for any of us to have an account that pays out interest. I don't think that that's necessary, because there's so many banks now that have current accounts that don't pay interest. But again, you look for the best you can. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. So try and look for one that doesn't pay interest at all. Try and look for one that only uses your money in an Islamically acceptable way. Try and find a one from an Islamic bank if possible. But at least minimum standard should be to get rid of that. If somebody couldn't and they have an account that is paying them interest, what can they do? In this case, I would suggest that they take that money and that they give it in sadaqah, in charity, to a poor person, or some of the scholars said to things that are not like honorable and particularly noble, like you don't really want to be building a masjid with it or anything like that, but just used for like small things, like somebody just needs basic food, or somebody or the masjid might need some cleaning products or something like that. Then it's not something good that we're giving, and when you're giving it, you're not being rewarded for giving it either. Like, you're just giving it to get it out of your dhimma, out of your responsibility. So I would recommend getting rid of that account. And if you can't get rid of it, then take the interest and just get rid of it in a way that is the best you can do Islamically. So probably maybe the masjid has cleaning products they would need, or you can just give it to a poor person to buy some basic necessities with, inshallah. Okay, what is the ruling on playing war video games such as Call of Duty? There are a number of aspects when it comes to video games that we need to be thinking about. The first is a general concern over wasting time, because generally it is a concern. And whenever somebody is engaged in something that's using up a lot of their time like that, and it has the potential for a person to become busy instead of their salah and instead of their dhikr, then that is a major concern. But let's presume for a moment that this particular situation, we're not going to talk about that aspect of it. The next thing is to look at the content of those games. Is the content of those games permissible or impermissible? Now, again, there's some general concerns, things like music, the ability to chat to people of other gender, the opposite gender, um, the depiction of people wearing inappropriate clothing, and so on and so forth. And different games have different amounts of that in. I must admit, it's been a very long time since I've seen Call of Duty, to be honest with you, that I would know what the latest editions, versions, or whatever contain. I'm not really very familiar with that, but a lot of games do depict now people wearing inappropriate clothing and so on. Let's presume there's none of that, and we go to the next stage. In games that involve war, your concern is you don't want to be involved in a game which is depicting something that would be haram in of itself, like if it were done in real life. um, Killing innocent people, robbing people, stealing things from people, and so on. Now, war in itself, of course, is not something that is inherently haram, depending on how it's conducted and who it's conducted by. So that is not perhaps the biggest concern there, but it could be that you have to play a game where the objective is that you're a soldier that has to kill innocent people, or you're a soldier that has to kill women and children, or you're a soldier that has to kill um, Muslims, for example. And in some of these games, the enemy, so to speak, is depicted as Muslims, often praying in a masjid or dressed as Muslims. Who, some of the people who make these games, they think that those guys, that's how they should depict the enemy or whatever. So I would avoid anything that resembles anything like that. And generally speaking, there's a lot of concerns you have over that. And I don't want to make something haram that Allah Azza wa Jal didn't make haram. Or I don't want to make a statement like that, but I have concerns over how much time is used. I have concerns over the content in terms of music, clothing, so on and so forth. And I have concerns over the fact that somebody might be playing a game in which they are glorifying the haram, like the killing of innocent people, or the killing of Muslims, or that they are on the other team, or the Muslims on one team. And for هذا, and it's all of it is a bit problematic for me. Having said that, I must admit that I'm not familiar with the latest versions of that game that was mentioned, and I think that people have to exercise good judgment in that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Okay, so a question: I have graduated and I have an existing student loan for my undergraduate degree. Will I have to pay this back? Because I've heard so many conflicting pieces of advice. It doesn't fulfill the criteria as a real nose, it gets wiped off. I currently don't earn enough to pay this back, and I've been trying to find an answer to this, as it's something I would like to rectify before it's too late. I completely agree that it's something that should be rectified for sure, because a person doesn't want to die and have something like that written in their account. A lot of us might have started something like that and realized our mistake and walked away from it. Some people might have not completed their degree. Some people might have completed their degree. Some people might not have realized that it was not allowed. And some people might have gone with a fatwa that they heard from circulating that it was allowed, and so on. So I'm going to try to clarify this as best I can. First of all, it's my personal belief, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best, based on the research that I've done, based on the research that I've seen from the people that I trust, from the strong students of knowledge and the people who have researched this very well. I personally believe that it is an interest-bearing loan and that it's not permissible for a person to take. That's what I feel. And I know that there were some of the students of knowledge who put forward some suggestions that this isn't the case. And I personally, I don't agree with that position. And I don't agree with the fatwa that was given in that regard. I personally, from what I can see and from what I can research and from the research that I've seen done by other people, is that I firmly believe that these are interest-bearing loans and they hold the ruling of interest. So now we have many students who have taken an interest-bearing loan and they want to change. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He told us about ru'usu amwalikum, falakum ru'usu amwalikum. He said that the person who gives out an interest-bearing loan has the right to their capital sum, the capital. They don't have the right to that interest, but they have the right to the capital, to the basic amount that they gave you. However, the situation here is more complicated. So, what I would say in the beginning is if it were possible to give them back nothing except the capital that they had given to you. In other words, let's just say that they had lent you £12,000 and you have the ability to give them back £12,000, then that would appear to be praiseworthy, to give them back the exact amount that they gave to you and to have your account closed. But what we can see from what we know at this moment in time is that that's not really possible. If you start giving it back, they will take interest on it, and they're not willing, to the best of our knowledge, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. If this is not true, then you can disregard what I'm saying. But to the best of our knowledge, they're not willing to take back the capital. They're willing to either they take it all or they take nothing. So we say then the next best thing is not to give them anything. And that is, if you are not earning enough money that you have to pay it back, then you just wait until it is cancelled and they take nothing from you, because ultimately they only have the right to the capital that they've given you. They don't have a right to anything more than that. Again, for some people, that's not possible because they're earning too much money and they don't have a choice. So we say to them that your responsibility is to minimize the munkar as much as possible. That is to pay as little interest as possible, to pay as quickly and in such a way that you minimize the interest wherever possible. And that is my, what are we on, third or fourth choice? I said, if they would have taken the capital sum, alhamdulillah, if you could have phoned them up and said to them, look, can I give you back the capital and can we cancel this? And they said, yeah, we'll take the capital. Alhamdulillah. If they never ask you for anything anyway and you don't give them anything because they never asked for anything because your job is not high enough, then that is also fine. I put that in second best position simply because it means that the loan is still in your dhimma. It's still on your head until you reach whatever, 65 or 60 or whatever the age is that they cancel it off, or 30 years after the loan was given, or whatever it is. If that is not possible and they are forcing your employer to take it out of your salary and they're not giving you any other option for that, then your responsibility is to pay it as quickly as possible to minimize the interest as much as possible. Now, generally speaking, that would be either to pay it off by borrowing from somebody, or that would be just to pay it as quickly as possible so that it could be minimized as much as possible. Again, the best thing would be not to have been involved with this at all. And that would be my advice to the current students and the people who are future students, not to get involved in this at all. But those who are involved in it, then this is my best advice that I can give, because Islam came to promote good and to increase it and to remove evil and to decrease it. So wherever we can decrease the evil and minimize the interest, then that is what it must be done. And like I said, if a person doesn't earn enough money and they never ask for it, then no problem, just let it expire. But obviously that has the issue of it being on someone's name for that length of time. And I don't know of any way that a person can give them back their capital without giving them back the interest. uh, there may be ways to do that. That's something somebody could research, whether they would accept an agreement whereby you say, look, I am willing to, I would not otherwise give you it back, or I would not be able to. So what I'm willing to do is I'm willing to enter an agreement for the capital sum, but I don't know of any way to do that to the best of my knowledge, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. So the next question, is separation allowed in Islam? Separation, I take it by this, a person is referring to an agreement between husband and wife that doesn't entail divorce, but entails them living separately from one another, or living apart from one another in a way where they are still married, but they are not living together, or not having all of the rights of the husband and wife. So in this, in Surah An-Nisa, in ayah number 148, Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَإِنِ امْرَأَةٌ خَافَتْ مِنْ بَعْلِهَا نُشُوزًا أَوْ إِعْرَاضًا فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا أَنْ يُصْلِحَا بَيْنَهُمَا صُلْحًا وَالصُّلْحُ خَيْرٌ. Allah Azza wa Jalla said, and if a woman fears from her husband contempt or evasion, there is no sin upon them if they make a settlement between them, and settlement is something good. So this is referring to the sulh. And a sulh is where the husband and wife, they don't divorce, but they make an agreement in which they agree that they will forgo certain rights. Perhaps they will not live together. Perhaps certain things will not be there in order for them to sort of be still married, but to maybe come to an agreement in certain things. What we might term a separation, although it doesn't have to involve that. This is something that I'm going to speak about in detail in my current course, which is ongoing. It's a free course. You can access it at www.amauathome.com. amauathome.com. ATHOME.com. And we're going to go through an-nushuz, marital discord, and we're going to, inshallah, go through a sulh and what's allowed and what's not allowed. So I'm going to talk about that in detail at that particular point. But yeah, it is possible in Islam that a couple could agree to forgo certain rights between each other in order to keep the marriage from breaking apart and ending in divorce. And that could be a kind of a separation, and it's known in Islam as a sulh, an agreement between the husband and wife to sort of save the marriage, if you like. Okay, so this is regarding a sister who says, extremely underweight for my age, and I have kids during Ramadan. I've struggled to fast since I had kids, as I lose more weight and deplete energy to take care of them, and I look unhealthy, and I miss so many fasts, and with deep regret, I don't know if I can fast because I naturally eat little. So I would say here, it's very difficult when you're in that situation to be objective, to be fair to yourself about what you can and can't do. What I would recommend is, and I don't want to tell somebody that they have to fast when they might have a medical condition that prevents them from fasting. And I don't want to tell a sister that you shouldn't fast when that fast might be something which you can do, and it might be something which could cause you to be sinful in the sight of Allah by not doing it. What I would say is that you should speak to a suitably qualified medical practitioner who is aware of your medical history. Now, I understand that it's not easy at this time when the doctors and the GPs are very, very busy and the health service is strained, but it might be possible for you to find somebody in connection with the masjid, or it might be possible for you, if you know somebody, that you could speak to them and ask them their opinion based on your medical history. So obviously there are some cases of somebody who is extremely underweight for whom they would not be allowed to fast for medical reasons. And there are some cases where that wouldn't affect. And it might be that the doctor would say, look, you just be very careful that you eat at iftar plenty, and you eat again, and before suhoor and so on, that you eat plenty and you be fine. So I don't want to take the place of a doctor, and I don't want to kind of give a medical advice that might cause you harm, or might cause you religious harm also, because I might tell you don't fast, and then it might be an obligation upon you. And Ramadan is a pillar from the pillars of Islam, to fast the month of Ramadan. So I would say that you need a doctor to make that decision who's aware of your medical history, and you should make a decision fearing Allah and with the appropriate medical advice. But your perspective, your attitude should be one of fasting, not one of not fasting. What I mean by that is you shouldn't be going to your doctor and saying, how is it I can get out of fasting, so to speak, but saying, look, I want to fast. These are my medical problems. I want to fast. It's very important to me. How can I fast? And if the doctor turns around and says to you, I'm sorry, that's not possible, you can't fast with the condition that you have, then Alhamdulillah. But if you went there and you said, because especially as a non Muslim doctor may not understand the importance of fasting and may say, no, don't fast. But you call and you say, look, it's very important for me to fast. I want to fast. Fasting is a really big part of my religion. How can I fast? And the doctor says you can't fast. Alhamdulillah, you have to accept that. And if there is a hope that you can, take care of yourself during the time when you're not fasting, and you'll be able to fast later on in the year, inshallah, then that is what you must do. And if la qaddar Allahu dhalik, may Allah not make it the case that this is something that affects you for your whole life, and the doctor says that there will never be a time when you'll be able to fast, then that has a different ruling in terms of feeding poor people and so on. But I presume that this is a situation that once you get a little bit better and you take care of your health, that you'll be able to fast. So I would go to the doctor, say to the doctor, I want to fast. It's very important to me. What can I do? And if the doctor says you can fast on these conditions, you just make sure you do them. And you can't allow your children to be a reason why you end up neglecting your responsibilities in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the same time, you can't be fasting and making yourself seriously ill. So this is one that we have to refer back to the medical professionals. Okay. Would you please explain the Islamic view about graphic design? As a designer, what should be our concern to assure that our income is halal? So there are two parts to this question. One part is the general concern of income being halal. I'm not going to talk too much about that, which could be to do with fulfilling amana, to do with being clear about what you charge for, and so on. I'm going to speak about the things which are specific to graphic design, and that is making sure that the graphic design that you're doing is not supporting something haram or involving something haram. Supporting something haram, I give you a simple example, like making a poster for a company that is promoting alcohol, for example. And that's an extreme example, but just example that you are promoting or supporting a poster for a company to encourage people to drink alcohol, for example, or to encourage people to free mix, for example, whatever it might be. The next concern would be, like we said, is that supporting something which is haram, or encouraging it, or being a part of it, or the content being haram. And what by the content being haram, we mean that it might be a halal company, could be like a travel or something like that company making a poster for them, but the picture involves a woman whose aura is not covered properly, for example. You have to be careful of these things, and that is relating to supporting projects and services and companies that are haram, and using pictures that are haram within your content. The third thing which you must be careful of, and this is something which might come under graphic design, is that a person is in their graphic design, they're using a picture of a living being, like a human being or animal, and they know that the client is going to print that out. So that would be impermissible. If it is in digital format, this is something the scholars differed over, and I think that it's okay in digital format, inshallah. But we want to be careful that you're not doing something where a picture of a person or an animal is going to be printed out and used like in printed media. Now, so those would be some of the areas that I would have concern over, aside from the basic issues of not cheating people and being fair in how you account for your time and so on. Those basic things about how we make our income halal. Okay. I have donated a small amount of money to a Facebook page, um, and the issue of whether they could be scams and things like that, and being careful about zakah. I think it's really important that we distinguish between a zakah and a sadaqah. Zakah is something that, yes, we can. Sadaqah is something that, yes, we can be a little flexible. Of course, we shouldn't be giving it to a scam, but if we did our best and we researched and we gave sadaqah and it turned out not to be correct, then inshallah it's their sin and not your sin. But zakah is something very serious indeed. And the word was used about orphans, and I want to be very clear that orphans are not eligible for zakah in of themselves, i.e., being an orphan doesn't make you eligible for zakah. What makes you eligible for zakah is being poor. You could be an orphan and you could be a millionaire orphan. Like being an orphan in of itself doesn't make a person eligible for zakah necessarily. And there are orphans who have money, there are orphans who have houses, there are orphans who live in an orphanage but have a large amount of money available to them in a trust. Just being an orphan doesn't make you eligible for zakah. Rather, being poor makes you eligible for zakah, regardless of whether you're orphan or not an orphan. So I think that the person has to be very careful about this. And in terms of people being scared of falling into scams, I think with regard to sadaqah, you can be a little more relaxed about that. You should check it's not a scam, of course, because a lot of scams fuel criminal activity, which is something we would never want to be involved in. But at the same time, you can be a little relaxed when it comes to the general sadaqah. You do your due diligence, but inshallah, it's enough. But with zakah, I would be extremely, extremely strict. And yes, you do withhold. Like, for example, let me give you a very simple example of that. The beggars that come outside. Beggar comes in the street, puts out his hand, says, please, can you give me some money? The problem you have is, I want to help somebody. They're needy. It's sadaqah. I want to help them. But also, I realize that a lot of these people are fueling criminal activity, drug abuse, gangs, exploitation, modern slavery. So I have to balance the issue here. Now, sometimes I feel convinced of their truthfulness. Like, for example, there was a person who came to me and said, look, he said, I'm asking for some help, but my situation is like this. And, I'm not asking for money. I just want somebody to buy me whatever, like a ticket for something, a bus ticket home, I think it was. I just want someone to go to the bus station, buy me a bus ticket home. That's it. And I don't need any money. And I thought, okay, that's fair enough. That seems to be reasonable to me. And I can't be sure this person is telling me the truth, but inshallah ta'ala seems to be a reasonable request. So we could help them with that. And there are times where you feel very doubtful about it. And there are times where you don't know. And in the times where you don't know, I think you give a small amount, very small, something so that you just make yourself feel better about it. But you don't give them a large amount without checking properly what this person is really about and what they're really involved in. And that's why I believe that the best sadaqah, and the one that I've always tried to encourage people to give, is the sadaqah where you really know the person that you're giving it to. And that means that you actually looked into the situation. Someone came to you and said, I need money. You said, look, give me 2 minutes of your time. Why do you need money? What happened to you? Okay, I lost my job. Okay, so do you need money, or do you need someone to write your CV so you can go and get a job? Like, is me giving you £20 or £30 going to help you? Or is me giving you £20 and helping you to get a job going to help you? Like, I would much rather help somebody that I understand what they really need, rather than just that you're just giving that money and then you don't know whether they need that or not. Like, for example, if someone has a drug habit and you're just giving them money, you're not helping them. You just help them to buy more drugs. You're not helping them. So the question is, what that person really needs is, if you have no choice and you don't really know, just give something small. But if you really want to give beneficial sadaqah, actually take some time to ask that person, what do you need? And you might find what they need is not cash as much as it is um, something a bit more than that, like help and support, and that should be more important. So I'm seeing some new questions coming up there as well. I am going to answer those inshallah ta'ala. Just give me a moment to get through a few of these ones that were sent in earlier on in the week, and I will do my best to answer these questions too. Okay. When the Quran tells us to lower our gaze, is it literal that we look at the ground, or is it looking away from the opposite gender? So the term lowering the gaze has a number of different applications, and Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned some of them. From it is looking away from the aura. That's one of the elements of looking away, lowering the gaze, is looking away from the aura. And the aura of the woman is from the top of the head to the tip of a toe, and the aura of the man is from the navel to the knee, and looking away from the aura. So that's one meaning. And the other one is looking away from shahawat, from things that make you desire somebody. And that might be, that could be more than just necessarily the aura, and looking away from things that are not your concern, like not looking into someone's house or through someone's window. These are all elements of lowering the gaze. As for whether you look at your feet or you look at right or left, I don't think that this is necessarily the important thing. What's important is that you don't look at the aura, you don't look at what kindles your desire, and you don't look at that which is private to other people. These are the most important things that we can say about lowering the gaze, inshallah ta'ala. I'll just see if there's another part to that question. I think that is the best that we can mention here. So in terms of lowering the gaze, not looking at the aura, not looking at that which kindles desire, and not looking at those things which are private. Okay, very good question, and alhamdulillah, all of these questions were good. I'm trying to get through as many as possible. What are the ways in which we can prepare for Ramadan? I have a 7-month-old baby and I'm struggling because she consumes so much of my time. So my first advice to the sister who wrote this is really very, very simple, is that what you need something which we call al-ihtisab, which is that when you're doing something like looking after your baby, you are remembering that that is a part of your worshipping of Allah. You're keeping in your heart that I'm doing this because that's my role. The woman is a ra'iya, she's a shepherd. وَهِيَ مَسْئُولَةٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهَا, and she's going to be asked about her flock, she's going to be asked about her children. So she keeps in her mind that this thing I'm doing for my children is part of me worshipping Allah, and she doesn't see that as being necessarily separate. Likewise, someone says, I'm so busy in the house, I'm cleaning, I'm cooking, whatever. Consider that to also be a part of coming near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it be through looking after the husband's house, obeying the husband, or taking care of him. All of these things are a part of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded. So if a person has the right niyyah, they can be rewarded for that niyyah, and that's what we call al-ihtisab, expecting reward from Allah for certain actions that you're doing and certain things that would normally be worldly things, but you're expecting the reward from Allah for those things. As for preparing for Ramadan, then I have some really detailed lectures on this, and I don't want to sort of take like a long time on it, but I'll just mention a couple of points. For those detailed lectures, you can just go on YouTube, just type in Muhammad Tim Ramadan, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of preparing for Ramadan lectures that I've done. But I just want you to think about a couple of things. First of all, what's the purpose behind Ramadan? Why are you going to start fasting? Allah Azza wa Jalla said, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. O you who believe, fasting has been made obligatory for you as it was obligatory for those people who came before you, so that you may be from a people of taqwa. So the purpose behind fasting is to gain taqwa, and taqwa is to increase in obedience to Allah and decrease in disobedience to Allah, and to protect yourself thereby from the curse of Allah and His anger and His fire and the punishment of Allah Azza wa Jal. So if you're going to protect yourself by doing more good deeds, the purpose is to increase in good deeds, to get nearer to Allah, to take away the reason why you're distant from Allah, which is the sins and disobedience. And so when you have that goal in mind, you can take some very specific steps as to how to get near to Allah in that month. So I have a lot of information on that, a lot of videos I've already done on that topic. So I would direct you to have a look at those, but I would ask you to keep in mind taqwa, increasing in obedience to Allah and decreasing in disobedience to Allah. It is the month of the Quran, so you should be trying to build a relationship with the Quran, but you should also be remembering that looking after your little one is also something that is very much rewardable, and it's a responsibility, but you have to have the right intention to get rewarded for it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. It is mentioned that Allah descends every night in the last third of the night. How do you reconcile between that and the fact that it is nighttime in one place and it is daytime in others due to different time zones? Does that mean that Allah is always descending? In reality, this is part of the kayfiyya of an-nuzul. And the kayfiyya, how Allah Azza wa Jal descends, this is something that Allah hasn't burdened us with. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows better how He descends, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows better about the different times and places. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing like Him, and He is the all-hearing, the all-seeing. So that's something that we don't need to know about that, and we don't need to concern ourselves with it. What we need to concern ourselves with is the last third of the night, where we are turning to Allah Azza wa Jal, making dua to Him, making our tahajjud, praying our prayers. That's what we need to concern ourselves with. And anything beyond that, in terms of different places and time zones and things like that, we don't need to concern ourselves with that. And the rules that apply to us in this universe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is outside of that Jalla fi'ula. He is above His throne, above the heavens, and He descends in a way that fits His majesty and His perfection. So I think that this is something that Allah hasn't asked us to be aware of, hasn't given us the information about. We don't say that means Allah is always descending. We say just about Allah what He said about Himself, that He descends in the last third of the night. And we don't need to kind of go any further than that or into any more detail about that, because Allah Azza wa Jal is not constrained or is not limited by the physical things that He has created, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, He is above His throne and He descends in a way that befits His majesty, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you need wudu if you are reciting the Quran from an app on your mobile phone? And asking about that during menstruation. You don't need wudu if you are reciting Quran from mobile phone or from a translation, which is half Arabic, half translation, or something like that. You don't need wudu for that. But if you have wudu, then it's better. And you can recite Quran when you're menstruating, either from memory or either from your phone or a computer. But you shouldn't recite from the Arabic Mus'haf, that is the copy of the Quran which is purely in Arabic, and that is just to be safe because of the different opinions on the scholars on that topic. What is the correct aqidah regarding the statement that Allah is the nur of the heavens and the earth? Because they say that it implies Allah is everywhere. So first of all, we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not everywhere. Allah Azza wa Jal is above His throne, which is above the seven heavens, and that is something which is established in over 1,000 evidences in the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So there's plenty of evidences for that. Among that is the hadith in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the servant girl, and he said to her, "Ayn Allah wa man ana?" Where is Allah and who am I? She said, Fis sama, and he said, who am I? And she said, you are the messenger of Allah. And he said, free her, فَإِنَّهَا مُؤْمِنَةٌ, for she is a believing woman. So that is sufficient in that regard. As for the statement of Allah, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard, then one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the light of Allah Azza wa Jal, and some of the scholars considered an-nur to be a name from the names of Allah Azza wa Jal. But in this regard, and I will quote to you, I did get a quote of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala in this regard, what he said, but I don't want to make it overly complicated for you. I think it's sufficient that we establish that it doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is everywhere, but I just will quote to you what I will quote to you from Majmu' al-Fatawa. Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah said in Majmu' al-Fatawa, he said that the text of the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have named Allah Nur al-Samawati wal-Ard, the light of the heavens and the earth. And these texts have told us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is is described as that with that word nur, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his veil is nur, is light. And so these are three lights. One is the sifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attribute of Allah azza wa jal, and one is the veil that veils Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is light, and one is the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَأَشْرَقَتِ الْأَرْضُ بِنُورِ رَبِّهَا, that the earth has been lit up by the light of its Lord. And then he quoted the hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr, that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, indeed Allah created his creation in darkness, and he cast onto them from his light, and whoever is touched by that light is guided, and whoever is not touched by that light is misguided. And the scholars of Islam, some of the early generations, they differed with regard to some of the way they explain this. We can say sufficiently, without wanting to get into too many details, that none of them said that this means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is everywhere. And there is no doubt that the light that a person is guided by, and maybe I can explain this better if we look at, for example, and maybe if I give you this example, it will become clearer. If you look at the example of the rahmah of Allah Azza wa Jal, the hadith about the mercy of Allah being divided into 100. The mercy of Allah being divided into 100. Does the mercy of Allah as a sifa of Allah tatajazza? Can it be divided up? Can you take a sifa of Allah Azza wa Jal and divide it into pieces? You can't divide a sifa of Allah Azza wa Jal into pieces. However, what it means is the effect of the mercy of Allah that has been divided up. And so Allah Azza wa Jal, his nur, that is his sifa, cannot be, in that sense, you can't see it like that it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is everywhere, the same way as we spoke about the mercy. Rather, you can say that from the effect of that sifa, from the effect of that light, is that people are guided and misguided. And you can also speak about the ahadith that talk about the veil of Allah Azza wa Jal being light and so on. But as for this saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is everywhere, then I don't find that this is something that any of the Salaf al-Salih, the righteous predecessors, mentioned with regard to this ayah, Allahu Nur al-Samawati wal-Ard. The discussion on this is actually pretty long, and I'm trying to simplify it without making it too long and without making it overly complicated for people. So perhaps we can suffice ourselves with that discussion or with that quote, and maybe when we come to this description in our Names of Allah series, we can really talk about it in a bit more detail. Perhaps we can also quote from Al-Imam As-Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala. Allah, he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, يَهْدِ اللَّهُ لِنُورِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Allah guides to his light whoever he wills. Whoever Allah knows his purity and and the purity of him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the examples to people so that they understand them as, in a subtle way, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and out of his generosity towards them, so that the truth can become clear from the falsehood. And these examples, they bring the meanings closer to so that we can understand, so that people can understand clearly. Wallahu bi kulli shay'in alim. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of everything, and everything is within his knowledge. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave these examples because they are maslaha, they are of benefit to the people. And so people must try to understand them and to think about them and not to turn away from them and not to go against them, and so on. That's a quote from an Imam al-Sa'di, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his tafsir of the ayah. But he's also explain, inshallah ta'ala, what is intended by the ayah. Bi'idhnillah ta'ala, we can come to that perhaps in more detail later on. Okay, the next question relates to, and there's not too many more, it relates to the topic of free insurance provided by your bank. Insurance generally is not permissible in Islam. Insurance is not permissible in Islam. And it may be you have to take insurance because you have no choice and there is no other option available to you. For example, your car insurance, you're not allowed to drive a car without it, and you could you could be stopped on the road for not having it or something. But generally speaking, you should avoid it as much as possible. And the fact that it's free doesn't mean that it is permissible. There was a further question, and I'm not going to go too much into it, but just a little bit. How far should we follow our parents in their instructions? So if they tell us something is haram, then of course we don't follow them. And likewise, if they tell us something which is clearly harmful or clearly not beneficial to us, like for example, if one of them says, divorce your wife, and you say to them, why would I divorce my wife? Like, you have to give me a reason for that. And they say, just divorce your wife. Then also, even though it would be permissible for the person to do that because it's not from the muharramat, it's not from the things which are haram, if they don't give a reason for that, then then a person is not obliged to obey their parents in this regard. If your parents say fill in an insurance claim for a holiday insurance, then it's not permissible for you to help them in that. There is no, if you should only help people in that which is good. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. If your parents don't allow you to segregate your wedding, then there is no obedience to them in this. You segregate it and you disobey them in the best possible way. And Allah knows best. You said in a previous talk that reading Surah Al-Kahf is on a Friday is weak. Yes, I believe that the narrations are not strong on reading on a Friday, but there is no harm on reading it on a Friday or reading it once a week in any other day, inshallah. And the majority of the ulama, they said to read it on a Friday, so I don't see any issue in that. But as a narration, I don't believe that the narration is strong enough to justify reading it on a Friday specifically. Not allowed to put up Allah's name in your house because it's disrespectful during intimacy. No, I don't think that's the reason. I think that you shouldn't put Allah's name in your house because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا آيَاتِ اللَّهِ هُزُوًا. Don't take the names of Allah as a decoration and a joke and entertainment, but take it to be serious, something that the ayat of Allah is something serious that you think about, that you reflect upon. So I don't think you should be using them as artwork or putting them up on the wall. Rather, you should be reflecting upon them and learning them and turning to Allah Azza wa Jal through them. How do you deal with jinn suddenly making their presence known in the home? I would suggest that a person first of all tries to ignore whatever they can. They turn to Allah, they recite the Quran, they can recite Surah Al-Baqarah, and they can turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in dua and in prayer. And I think that would be sufficient, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And I've spoken about this in more detail in the Ruqya courses, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. Is it obligatory for a woman to cover her head when reciting the Quran or any of the books of Islam like Sahih al-Bukhari? I don't know of any evidence for that. That seems to be a cultural practice. And I'm not sure that I can't find an evidence why a woman needs to cover her head when she is reciting any of the Islamic books. Is it haram to remove food from between your teeth using your tongue or fingers? I'm not sure of anything. I couldn't find anything specific on that. Maybe culturally, it could be min khawarim al-muru'ah, from the things which are culturally looked down upon. So you shouldn't do it if people don't like it, or if it's considered to be like culturally not very nice. But I mean, I don't know of any Islamic reason that prohibits you removing food between your teeth. Perhaps we can find some hadith regarding this, but I from what I could find, I couldn't find anything until now. Are you allowed to pray Isha until Fajr time? Scholars differed about this, but in my opinion, there are two times for Salatul Isha. There is a normal time, there is an emergency time. The normal time is until half of the night has passed, and that is the time that you should be praying Isha within. That is half the time between Maghrib and Fajr. However, in some cases, you can extend it until Fajr time if you have a valid excuse, but only if you have a valid excuse. And that appears to be the correct opinion, inshallah ta'ala. So we finished the questions that were on the sheet. We can now come to the question that was asked on the live stream. I know someone who reverted to Islam, and they said for Islam they must forget their previous life and their previous family. Does Islam say you must do this when you're reverting? No, there is no such rule in this, and I don't think that person has been given. Maybe they were not given correct information, or maybe it was the case that they were given correct information but they misunderstood it. When people say forget your previous life, maybe they mean to leave your previous life behind you, to make changes, not to go back to the mistakes you made before. But your family are deserving of your companionship, even if they are not Muslim, as Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَإِن جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَى أَن تُشْرِكَ بِمَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٌ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. That if they compel you, that is your family, your parents, if they compel you to associate partners with God in what you don't have any knowledge of, then don't obey them, but accompany them in this world in the best way. There was also a question, and anyone with regard to questions on reverting, they're more than welcome to ask the questions, inshallah. And we could also direct them possibly to an organization that would be able to give them some better support and help. So I would recommend for sure, if they're in the Newcastle area, that they would get in touch with IDC Northeast, who have specialist support for reverts, inshallah. And I'm sure that the links will be available. The admin for this page will be able to put the links for the people who might be in the Northeast, who would want some extra help with reverting and things like that, from a team of people who would be familiar how to deal with things like family and things like that, inshallah. But there is no rule in Islam about leaving your family behind or anything like that. The role of, I guess that what the question is the role of an imam or the role of iman. Those two different words, so I'm not quite sure on that one. But an imam with an M, it means it means to lead. So an imam is a leader or an example, and it's usually the person who leads the people in prayer in the masjid, in the mosque. So when the person stands at the front, leads the people in prayer, that's an imam, a leader or an example. And the word imam can also be used for the word to mean an example. وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, make us an example for the people of piety. So that's, and as for the word iman with an N at the end, then this means faith, and it's the things that you believe and the things you say and the things that you do that bring you closer to God. So hopefully that would help people to understand, inshallah. So that brings us to the end of the session. It's certainly in Newcastle right now. It's Maghrib time. So we're going to stop, inshallah, there. We're going to try and hold a similar session next week, inshallah ta'ala. I tried to go through all the questions as much as I can. Please bear in mind that the answers have two conditions. Number one, they're only as good as the understanding of the question. So if I didn't understand the question properly, or I didn't properly grasp what was being asked, then the answer might not always be as good as it should be. And of course, people are liable, including myself, to make mistakes. So if you do hear of anything in there that didn't make sense to you, then by all means seek clarification, seek the evidence for it, make sure that the answer given was correct, inshallah. That's what Allah made easy for me to mention, and Allah knows best. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.